For me, security skills are a variety of capacities in an individual which basically makes him or her to survive in an insecure environment, retaining her health, safety and well-being. I mean, if you want a shopping list, those kind of skills are basic security awareness, image, code of conduct, to understand the context where we are and put her or himself in the context, in the right place. Have a preventive thinking. As I always said, think twice, act once. Defensive driving, use of radio, team player, information sharing, obtaining information, analyzing information. I mean, there's a long shopping list. All these are security skills, individual skills, which make you an operational person.
At the moment, they prepare a list with 400 security people. Some will be used actually for the huts when the people queue up. So
security skills are basically good management skills. I think there's a lot of good management staff about communicating really well with your staff, being extremely receptive, so that you have a sort of ongoing personal context analysis that supports all of your decisions and informs those decisions. And it's also about things like good time management and organising work so that staff know where they are, they feel confident, they're not overworked, they're not overstressed. And of course it's also about being a kind of global manager, so that you do have an interaction with the context, you do speak the language, or you make attempts to learn the language, you're sensitive to the local culture. And that's a proactive thing. You can't just sit in your room and sort of be sensitive to local culture. You have to go out there and find out how things work, how communication works in that culture, what the key issues are for gender roles, or in terms of social hierarchies or decision-making within communities, all those kinds of things which are going to influence how you manage your programme and therefore how you manage your security.
Once defined in this way, it becomes clear that security is something that needs to be taken to the heart of organisations. To date, though, this has been rare.
The main barrier to good security management within NGOs at the present time and in the past and almost certainly in the future is a reluctance to engage with security. It's that ignoring of security because that people's needs are greater, we have to go past it. And this comes in on a personal basis. Everybody who comes into it is trying to think that they're doing good through working for an NGO. They don't necessarily want to think about security, and particularly their own personal security, without understanding, of course, that without security, you can't actually do your job. Ultimately, your organisation will fail and you will burn out.
Now, there are a lot of people who are sick.
I think, understandably, a number of humanitarian organisations may not necessarily have security as a priority to delivery of the programme. I think everybody needs to have an institutionalised health checking, as it were. I mean that in the context of building into any programme plan security awareness, bringing in a culture of security amongst not just the field workers but the management at post and the management back at headquarters. If that culture exists, if it's given adequate funding, then there ought to be systems and methods which allow for a safe delivery of the programme, but also cater for emergency responses, either how to prevent them happening in the first place, or perhaps more realistically, contingency planning in terms of what are you going to do or not going to do as and when it happens.
In many cases, organisations may wish to develop such a security culture, but in reality, find there are a series of what might be termed barriers to change.
I think there is definitely a lack of resources allocated to security generally. When you consider the implications of mismanaging your security, it's quite astounding how little time in proportion to the rest of the programming activity is actually spent on managing your security.
The first thing that anybody will say to you is time. I haven't got time for this. And that really begs the question, what have you got time for? If you're operating kind of responsively in emergency phase, maybe for weeks or months, and you haven't got time to plan effectively, which is what security management is about, or to look at your management systems, or to ensure that stress doesn't become an issue for your staff, that theft isn't an issue amongst the commodities you're distributing or whatever, then basically what you're saying is you haven't really got time to program properly. And if you haven't got time to program properly, are you doing a good job?
Time is one of several crucial resources that has to be allocated to improve our ability to manage security.
The other one, of course, is having the funds and equipment to actually effectively manage your security. So it's all very well sending somebody on a training course, but when they get back from their training, will they have the funds and equipment to actually implement the procedures required?
One thing that I've really taken away from providing security training in the field is the interconnectedness of any initiative to improve NGO programming. You must have really high-level policy interventions if you're trying to improve security management. You must be reviewing things in the field, looking at how programs work, looking at how offices are run, how staff are recruited, where the operations are taking place and what the program design is. And you must look at the local communities that you are working with and how they interact with your field level staff and what security implications that has for you and also for them.
It is clear that there is a great deal that we can do to improve our security. Given the environment that aid agencies are now working in, this is imperative if we are to safeguard our people and assets, retain the confidence of our donors, and continue to serve our beneficiaries. Security cannot be seen as a technical specialism that can be bolted onto an agency when it needs it. It has to come from within the agency itself. It has to be internalized in its staff and reflected in the way we live and work in the field. This requires serious organizational commitment, understanding, and support from our donors.
Take security seriously and invest as an organizational manager in security. It's always a good investment because, as I always told others, once you start to have body bags coming back home, it will affect recruitment, it will affect your image, it will affect your donor response. So security is something one should invest in and serious.
I like to speak in these proverbs because I think they are more meaningful sometimes.
It is all about mainstreaming and communication. I think those are the two things. It's understanding that the security officer certainly may be useful, particularly to deal with the meetings and all the information and to systemize it. But he or she is not useful if they take away security from management. Management is security, and that's the way to go forwards, to understand that the senior manager, his first responsibility or her first responsibility is responsibility to their staff for their security. And after that, the beneficiaries, but I say staff, both local staff and expatriate staff, without making any differentiation. That's the important thing.
Sometimes there's a lot of resistance to taking on a new issue. I think agencies can be fatigued by the idea that they will have to incorporate gender into their programs or diversity, and then they think, well, the new thing is security. And I think the more that people can see that this is really an integrated initiative to improve the work that we're doing in the field, and let's face it, it does need improvement, and that's a good thing, and it's worth dedicating resources and time to doing that. The more that they'll find it, you know, an unthreatening thing, which of course it shouldn't be threatening. Good security management is all about not being threatened or threatening.